The ANC's panic is tangible but also understandable. Yesterday, I made a video where I highlighted, and you should watch that after this video. Don't go watch it now. But I made a video where I explained the global war that is currently taking place. It's a war of ideologies, the war between capitalism and communism, freedom and human suffering. Donald Trump, Javier Milei, and the right-wing conservative governments of the world on the side of freedom and capitalism and everything that is good for society, and Cyril Ramaphosa, Emmanuel Macron, Friedrich Merz, Keir Starmer, China, Russia, on the side of communism and everything that is wrong and bad within societies. This is the new world order. And unlike with most world wars, it's most likely not going to turn into a kinetic war. Instead, what will happen is the world will be divided into blocks. You will have the Eastern Bloc and you will have the Western Bloc. Countries that favor freedom and that favor prosperity of their people will join the Western Bloc, and countries that embrace dictatorships and evil, wicked communist policies will embrace the Eastern Bloc. And they will suffer under the consequences of the mercy that China never shows anyone. That needs to be understood, because for the last 30 years, the ANC has enjoyed the protection as well as the amplification of the left, the Eastern Bloc, and their increased push to turn the entire world into a communist state. Then, in 2024, Donald Trump is elected to office in the United States for the second time, and Donald Trump, for the first time, starts to challenge the narrative of the ANC. A narrative that they have carefully constructed over 30 years that tells the world that they are this incredibly forward-thinking, loving, rainbow nation, democratically elected government that really just wants to help and build up their people. And Donald Trump says, but hold on, you're building up your people with the help of race laws. You've literally been in the process of reverse engineering apartheid to try and lock white and minority South Africans out of the economy in order to build an economy that only ever benefits the majority of this country. And in spite of what the ANC will tell you, where that's not what they've done, because look at how black people are suffering. Black people are suffering because the ANC is stupid as hell, not because the ANC doesn't want white people to be the ones suffering. The ANC's policies are aligned in such a way that they're trying to punish the white population of the country at the benefit of at least the small politically connected elite. The issue is that the ANC is stupid, and so their policies also manage to keep the black population of South Africa as poor as possible. And there is actually an argument that one can make here that the ANC does this on purpose because the poor population of South Africa constantly requires saving. And it's much easier as a politician to just say, hey, I'll give you free stuff if you vote for me, than it is to say, hey, I'll actually fix the economy for you, just, vote for me. Because fixing the economy can be very, very, very difficult. And as the ANC has shown, it is impossible for them to do. But thanks to op-eds written by Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State of the United States, yesterday, we have seen once again an absolute frantic, panicful push by the ANC to try desperately to regain control of the narrative. Even the media in South Africa is once again all on board Project Save the Communist ANC from the capitalist America. And of course, the media will do their old age, or the adage of white supremacy and evil right-wing politics and racist and all the rest of it. But you have to understand that all of those words are desperate attempts by the communists in the mainstream media to try and prop up the communist side, who is, and you can watch my video on this yesterday, losing the war of the world. Yes, the communist governments and the communist bloc will ultimately exist, but Europe, America, and all of the friends of America and Europe will actually become fierce opponents of this communist bloc. That is effectively the future of our world. Since this letter was published, you had Minister Lamola with his own responses to this letter, and we'll go through some of it, although most of it is very, very boring. You had Fikile Mbalula, who stepped out and said, untrue and fake news. The G20 held in South Africa and led by President Cyril Ramaphosa was one of the most successful, as hailed by all world leaders who attended. No one has been able to explain to me what is that success. It's claimed to be one of the most successful G20s that has ever been held Based on what bloody metric? It passed the declaration, so as every other G20 prior to it. Delegates enjoyed themselves, so did they at every other G20 prior to it. And you can actually go look. After every single G20, the delegates that go praise the people of the country for being hospitable and nice. That is, by the way, the only thing the South Africans have going for them. As Cyril Ramaphosa, said, a German delegate said to have commented, I've attended summits on 6 continents. I've never experienced warmth like this. Now, I don't want to take anything away from the South African people. We are a phenomenal people. It's the ANC that's the problem. But this is what's called being civil and nice. You don't go to dinner at someone's house and then afterwards tell them, yeah, the food was bland, the conversation was boring, I'm never coming back. You do the nice thing of saying, I had a wonderful time. We should do it again. And then both of you just stand there and nod, knowing that this is probably never happening again. Right? That's all this is. It's called basic civility. But no, we have to praise this. No one has been able to explain to me what is this success. In fact, if you want to claim that this was a substantial success, the Americans are claiming that South Africa changed the rules, broke decorum, and sabotaged the G20 meetings. Because America consistently leading up to the Leaders Summit had problems with the G20 declaration that South Africa was trying to push through, and South Africa continuously sabotaged those meetings. They would dox the delegates that come from America to try and rectify what this G20 document actually stands for. To this, Minister Ramola says, it is a matter of public record that the United States chose not to attend our G20 meetings. Given that absence, the notion of our sabotaging consensus is not just incorrect, it misunderstands the very purpose of a forum like the G20. America is not wrong, and they are not lying. Of course, the media will not tell you this. South Africa broke decorum in its entirety. They passed the Leaders' Declaration on day 1. It has always been since the establishment of the G20 on day 3, so the nations could have an opportunity to deliberate and discuss before it goes through. But what the media will absolutely not tell you is why it was passed on day 1. Keir Starmer, Emmanuel Macron, and Friedrich Merz instructed Cyril Ramaphosa that it would be better for him to pass this declaration on day 1. Despite the fact that Argentina voted no on the declaration, the South Africans still claimed that they had unanimous support for the declaration, to which Argentina actually stood up and said, just quick thing here, you do have majority support, and therefore you can carry the declaration because the declaration is completely useless in general, but you don't have unanimous support. We did not support this declaration. We have severe issues with said declaration. Now, the issue there is that why did Keir Starmer, Emmanuel Macron, and Friedrich Merz ask Ramaphosa to pass it day 1? Because they all understood one thing very clearly. If America phoned and said you will not support this declaration or all deals are off, they would have been forced to vote against the declaration. If they voted against it, all the other nations would follow as well, and South Africa would be made to look the fool. Remember, South Africa is the golden child for the communist Eastern blocs of the world. The Eastern communists, like Emmanuel Macron, like Friedrich Merz, like Keir Starmer, they need South Africa to be a beacon of hope and prosperity because that's the dream that they're selling to the world. Diversity is our strength. In spite of the fact that that has never been true anywhere in the world, diversity is never a strength. Unity is a strength. Diversity is the opposite of unity. So if unity is a strength, diversity is a ding, ding, ding weakness. That's just obviously true. If you had people pulling rope against one another, but on one team you have half the team pulling a different way, that is diverse, but it's certainly not helpful. It would be more helpful if all of the team on the one side is pulling in the same direction rather than everyone for themselves. That's the difference between unity and diversity. Here you have Fikile Mbalula claiming that America is bullying South Africa and that Donald Trump is attacking the ANC, which he is, because the ANC is an evil terrorist organization that should be ousted for what they're doing. They have time and again gone against the wishes of the West that happens to fund almost everything that they do. Time and again, they have voted against the Americans, this in spite of all of the concessions made by the Americans. But then you have people like, of course, Ben Phillips. This is what I would call the idiot left of South Africa. that say South Africa has a dignity that too many in the global north cannot conceive, let alone match. Of course, no country is above critique, but I continue to be thankful and inspired that South Africa remains a beacon for our world. What dignity, Ben, are you even talking about, you slithering snake? And Ben is a snake, make no mistake. What dignity? The declaration by the G20 in South Africa was basically South Africa begging the world for free stuff. That's one of the reasons America refused to attend. That's one of the problems that America had with the declaration. South Africa, and this is in Ronald Lamola's own words, by the way, South Africa's presidency was built on a simple, powerful belief that treating Africa and the global south as equal partners and honestly addressing the systemic macroeconomic issues that impede their growth is not an act of charity, but a strategic imperative for a stable, prosperous world. All of that mumbo jumbo, yeah, that means nothing. Because effectively what the G20 declaration was the South African government telling the world, hey, we know that we've taken out a lot of loans and we've basically been living it up with money that was borrowed and we wasted it on ourselves and BMWs and Mercedes. But can you guys just make us not pay it back? Like, is there any way for you guys to just forgive those debts or at least lower the interest rates entirely on this problem that is entirely self-created by us? Thank you. That's the problem that the United States had. South Africa, even now, refuses to take responsibility for their own actions. They want handouts and freebies. You talk about dignity, Ben. What the hell are you talking about? The South African government is effectively a glorified street urchin. You guys know when you stop at the robots and you have these kids that's just standing there sort of begging? That's the South African government at the robot that is the G20, the world. Every single time Cyril Ramaphosa stands there with these little hands in like this, right? Just throw a little coin in there so that we can get your free stuff because we need the money because we're too useless to run our own country. And then finally, Ronald Lamola goes on this giant rant about how the ANC, our democracy, is only 30 years young and no nation has been able to fix themselves, but we are making progress. South Africa is doing better than it's ever done before, and we're starting to see the green shoots of a new South Africa, and of course, pretending like there are no race laws in the country because they're redress laws, because communists really care about word usage. It's redress in the form of race laws, but don't call them race laws because that makes them feel bad. It's just redress laws in the form of race laws, of course. But he makes this point that they're actually fixing the country, but that it's a slow process because they have to dismantle all of the legacy of apartheid. And of course, it's always apartheid's fault. No matter what you do, it is always apartheid's fault. He says here, right, that it is not uncommon to meet people who finally is starting to make some money and is actually the first in their family to do so 30 years into our democracy. That is the living legacy of apartheid, a systemic racial inequality that once permeated every walk of life and whose shadows we are still dispelling. So I went to Grok and I asked it a question. I said, can you give me the GDP the real GDP numbers for 1994 all the way up until 2025 in US dollars? In 1994, the real GDP of South Africa is 187 billion US dollars. It's not too bad, very small, but hey, we're just coming out of a very dark period with the National Party. In 2025, that's 373 billion US dollars. One might look at that and say, hey, that's double the number. The truth, however, really reveals itself, and that's why I threw 2010 in there. And I didn't just throw 2010 in there because, giggles. No. Up until 2007, BEE in South Africa is largely a voluntary system. It has carrots, so companies who do engage in BEE policy will actually, get some benefits. But for the most part, it is just, it's up to you, right? You don't have to do it. In 2007, we see the first expansion of BEE, and it goes from being a voluntary system to a mandatory system for any company that wants to do business with the government. It would, in 2013 and 2015, become mandatory for any company that just wants to do business and not face severe penalties or severe problems, because suddenly any company that does business with the state cannot do business with companies that aren't BEE compliant. And that's why 2010 is so important. You see, from 1994 all the way up until 2010, the South African government manages to add over 100 billion US dollars to the economy. Could have been much higher, but we already had affirmative action and BEE in practice, and so they were warned that this will slow down economic growth, but it will not completely break it. In 2007, when they looked at expanding BEE even further, they were warned by economists that this will absolutely wreck economic growth. In 2013, they were warned that this will completely stagnate the economy. Because from 2010, 15 years later, the ANC has managed to add a measly 62 billion US dollars to the economy. So please, by all means, explain to me how apartheid is to blame for the current state of South Africa. But the numbers don't lie. If we had the growth from 2010 to 2025 that we had from 1994 to 2010, South Africa's economy would now have been way more than double that of what it was in 1994. Way more. We would likely have been closer to about 500 to 600 billion US dollars in terms of real GDP. Because that's how GDP growth works. It's exponential. The more you grow, the faster you grow, the faster you can grow. The amount of jobs we would have been able to create. You can see clearly something happened in and around 2010 that completely slowed down and crushed economic growth in this country. Crushed it. The answer is Jacob Zuma and Cyril Ramaphosa. The answer is incredibly racist policies that are meant and built purely for the punishment of the white minority in this country at the, I can't even say at the benefit of the majority black population, because it's not benefiting the majority black population. It's just everyone just suffers. But for the ANC, the redress is more important than any success. You see, this is why they get so angry at Donald Trump for accepting Afrikaner refugees and minority refugees in the country. It's not because they don't mind that colors are leaving the country, for example, or Indians want to leave the country. That they're not so worried about. The thing that really pisses them off is that this was their opportunity to visit their righteous vengeance upon the whites in this country. And now Donald Trump is taking away that right. Otherwise, it would not have bothered them. They don't like the white people being here. Even in Ronald Lamola's own article here, he consistently remarks about how white people still own too much of the economy, and that's why they need the redress laws. Well, they need redress in the form of race laws, but they can't call it race laws, so they just call it redress laws in the form of race laws. But he consistently argues that that's what's needed. Well, Donald Trump just gave you the golden ticket. You can get rid of all of the white people, move the economy squarely into the hands of the black people, and you would have all of your problems solved, at least the problems that you seem to think you have. But no, they don't like it. Why? Because this was their opportunity to punish the white people of this country. This entire letter, the entire panic, and social media is full of people running defense for the ANC. Social media, mainstream media, they're all running defense for the ANC, trying to defend and deflect from the attacks by the Americans. It's nothing more than a slip of the narrative, and they're realizing that they're losing ground. They know that the world is turning, and very, very soon the world will turn squarely against South Africa and its communist state. And when that happens, the people of South Africa will suffer. Trust me on that. But as always, that's my opinion. You can let me know in the comment section down below if you agree or disagree. I'd love to read your thoughts. Massive shout out and thank you to all of the patrons as well as the YouTube channel members for continuing to support this channel and making it possible for me to make these videos and hopefully to get more people to recognize and see the truth of what is happening in our world. So if you love truth and you think more people should have access to it, consider becoming a patron by hitting the link in the description down below or the join button right below this video for YouTube membership. As always, if you like what I do and you want more people to have access to it, hit the like button, hit that subscribe button, and share this video around with as many people as possible. And I'll see all of you in the next one. Peace.